Christmas time.
Take it easy and solve the school lunch problem with SPAM. S-P-A-M.
こんにちは、タイガークローラジオ。You are listening now. Fuck J.
You are listening to Tiger Claw Radio. Number one in vintage computer and video game entertainment. And now your host, Critical Failure.
Yes, indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Christmas time. It's on its way. You're listening to Tiger Claw Radio. This is being recorded on the 8th of December. My goodness, can you believe it? Got some good stuff coming for you this week. Got some real good van casting, as well as some fun stuff going on in the video game world. And that's it. We're going to have a great time. So let's kick things off with an awesome chiptune. This is Impact from Ember, E-M-B-R. You can get this MP3 over at chipmusic.org. Buckle up. You're listening to Tiger Claw Radio. Over on GOG.com, they have released several new games, and I don't really cover it when GOG releases games anymore because oftentimes they're not good old games, or very rarely they are. But they released Epic Pinball: The Complete Collection. Epic Pinball is a game that I have wondered why isn't available on GOG or Steam for a long time. Ever since they released the Pinball Gold Pack, I believe it's called. I'm going to take a look right now. Yeah, the Pinball Gold Pack. That's the one that has all those Amiga pinball games, Pinball Fantasies, and whatnot. I always wondered why Epic Pinball didn't make the cut and wasn't for sale. And now it's finally out. They released it at the lower price point, so $6.99, which is fair. I remember, this is the complete collection, and I remember back in the floppy disk days, the tables being traded one at a time on floppy disk. Everybody had the Android table, because that was the shareware table. But then there were a couple of people who had discs with just one table. Like, I remember the Cybergirl table being traded around, and that being like, whoa, this is hot stuff. So I didn't get to play a lot of the different table. I didn't get to go through the whole collection until later in life. But Epic Pinball is good stuff. Now, Dorobka, if you're out there, I know you prefer Pinball Gold, but I have to say, having played the Pinball Gold games and having played Epic Pinball games, Epic Pinball handles the high scores a little bit better, in my opinion. See, in Pinball Gold, in Pinball Fantasies and the games from that pack, when you play a game, it will only show you your score for a short period of time, and then it will go away. So it makes it hard to write it down and maintain your own local high scoreboard and whatnot. Something Epic Pinball handles a little bit better, if I remember correctly. But both awesome games. Also, I can see that it's not available on Steam at this point. Just GOG.com. At this time, I would like to Tarantino it just a little bit, like I do every week. Let's throw it back to early driving to work on Monday morning. This is the Vancast right here on Tiger Claw Radio. It's the Vancast Monday morning. Oh boy, driving to work. It's nice and it's how would I describe it outside? It's humid because I can barely keep the windshield clear. Coming off a good weekend. I'll tell you what, the primary reason I wanted to report in this morning is to talk about a couple things I played. First and foremost, let's talk about Forsaken on the N64. This is somewhat of like a forgotten about game that I unboxed over on Tiger Claw TV a week ago or so. Sat down with it and gave it a try. Now, I remember that game being very much like Descent, and I would say that's a good description. I played it for, I don't know, about an hour and a half or so. And they were making, at that time, first-person shooters were coming out, and they were being called Doom clones at that time. When Descent came out, the idea was, let's make a game like Doom, but we're going to add the Z-axis. So you can, turn in 360 degrees, and it'll be like a plane, right? Descent was cool in that regard. Not everybody liked it. Not everybody could stomach the extra dimension of movement. But at the very least, it was neat. Forsaken kind of consoleized that. They tried to streamline it a little bit in that there is a solid up and down in Forsaken. If you fly your plane, or bike I guess it is in that game, if you fly upside down and then let go of the controls, the Nintendo 64 is going to flip you around automatically. So you kind of snap into place. Whereas in Descent, you could fly into the walls and stuff and take damage. This is a game where you just sort of fly around, and if you hit the walls, you'll just sort of slide back into the play area with no harm done. Final result I got playing that game can be summed up like this. Flying around and shooting things is super cool, and navigating is a gigantic pain. Knocked out the first level and had a blast. The first level is like a double figure 8 arena, and you just gotta kind of blow everything up. That was great. The second level, they introduced some basic goals. Go find the A-bomb and then drop the A-bomb off at a certain location. So yeah, you had a bigger arena, and I was flying around blowing stuff up, and it was great at first. But then I emptied out all the hallways of all the monsters, and I had to figure out where I was supposed to go. That's where that game falls apart. That's where it falls apart, and it falls apart hard, in a big way, and super fast. So that got old, unfortunately. I did end up beating that level, but I had to restart it from the beginning and then pay closer attention to where I was going as opposed to just clearing out all the hallways of the enemies. Once I knocked that stage out, I went to the next stage, and the next stage was like a free-for-all. I couldn't gain any traction in the combat. They started to try and increase the combat difficulty by making the ships a little bit more. The enemy ships are a little bit more. What's the word? They're a little bit more aware of their space, I guess. Whereas in the first couple stages, you know, a probe will just sort of lock on you and start shooting, and you can draw a bead and take care of it. By the time you get to the third stage, the enemies are like dodging and weaving, and you better have strict command of that stick if you want to take them out. And I started having troubles. I think I would try it again. I had navigating in that game is just terrible, just all kinds of terrible. But you know, the shooting is cool enough. I'm willing to try it again. Now there is a multiplayer mode, which seems like it would be awesome. Here's the thing. I was just talking about this with Swingle a couple nights ago. When people say, "Oh, it would be great with friends," that doesn't really mean anything to me. I would identify that as a red flag or somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about. Right? Think about this. And Swing will forgive me if I'm saying the same thing we said when we talked about the other day. But what game can you think about that would not be fun joking around with friends? Think of the worst game you know of. Right? And if you had your friends with you and you're all laughing and joking, of course it'd be fun. So, as I say this about Forsaken, I understand how useless a comment it is. So I'll say it differently. Forsaken has competent potential for multiplayer. You remove the navigating and you just focus on the shooting, it could be a lot of fun. However, the niche of first-person 360-degree shooting, you might have a difficult time finding somebody to play this game with. It's hard enough to find somebody to split screen Smash Brothers with you, or not split screen, but do some couch multiplayer of some of the easy to pick up titles. Finding a solid player for Forsaken has got to be next to impossible. So, if I want to try and get 2.5 hours out of it. 2.5 hours out of a $5 purchase. I got my money back. Not the best purchase in the world, but I got my money back. So I'm definitely going to sit down with it again. But that's Forsaken. I think the market value is like $5.25 usually. It's not the worst it's not the worst Nintendo 64 game I have. I would say that honor goes to War Gods. Assuming you were going to give that to like a game that's not a sports game, I would say War Gods is the worst Nintendo 64 game that I own. So that was that. Apart from that, I played a little Friday the 13th, which is a game I'm still enjoying. I think bigger news for me is I started watching the Friday the 13th movies. I saw the first one years ago, and I sat down just yesterday, and I watched Friday the 13th Part 2. From, I was at 1981, I think that movie came out. It's the one where Jason's got a bag over his head. Man, I liked it. Oh, it was so good. I never watched slasher movies, really. I mean, I saw the first Friday the 13th. I saw the 2009 remake, and there's a couple of select movies I just saw with friends. But slasher movies have never been my thing. Never. But I watched this movie yesterday, and I was all about it. It was great. It was really good. So I think I might move on to Friday the 13th Part 3. Sit down and watch that and report back to you. I don't know. Maybe they'll get old fast. I could see that happening because a lot of these movies are a lot alike. And this is like the first slasher movie I've seen in many years. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes down. But that's it. I've got some good games to sink my teeth into, and I've got some movies I want to watch for sure, which is awesome. And I've got barely any time to do either of those things. The upside is, when I have some time to sit down and play some games, I've certainly got games to play. You know what else I played recently? I fired up Anarchy Arcade for the first time in a while. It's a free-to-play Steam game. I'm sure you guys who know me are very familiar with this game by now. Anarchy Arcade was a game that the developer wanted to strip it down and rebuild it from the beginning. And he did that. And the version that he rebuilt was severely crippled. So I had to put it aside for a long time. It's like, you got to fix the issues. And it's a touchy thing, because when it comes to Steam games, especially Steam games that have a lot of issues, there's a lot of examples of games that just never get fixed. So when you hit that wall where it's like, okay, in order for me to enjoy this, this and this and this has to be fixed. A lot of times that's never going to happen, and you just have to put the game aside. I went back to it, and thankfully, to my surprise, a lot of things had been fixed. It's still a little unfamiliar, but the ability to create, a 3D desktop environment where you can lay out arcade cabinets to launch your games, I still, after however many years that's been out, I still think that's super cool. There was another game that cost quite a bit that I purchased that did it not nearly as well. And that's the only time I ever asked for a Steam refund. This game was like, I don't know, $12 or $13 on sale on like a big holiday sale. I think it was the last winter sale, last summer sale or something. And it doesn't look a whole lot better than Anarchy Arcade, and I fired it up and it just chugged, man. My PC couldn't handle it. I was like, no thanks. No thanks. Optimization is important, guys. You gotta make a game that's gonna run for everybody. Or it has to look really good. Games that look mediocre, that don't run on mid-tier, lower-tier machines, I don't get that. There's a disconnect there. There's a problem. You gotta get in there and fix it. Alright. I also noticed that Jazz Jackrabbit was released on GOG.com. Now, when GOG releases games, I tend to not cover it a whole lot anymore. Because, for one thing, GOG.com is not good old games anymore. It's not. Most of the time when you see a release on GOG, it's like, I don't know, indie or new or I don't know, something that's not a good old game. So Jazz Jackrabbit being released on GOG.com is the first, like, oh, this is an old game that I know and now you can buy it. It's the first time that's happened in a while. Man, they priced it high though. Jazz Jackrabbit 1 and 2, they're $10 a piece. That's crazy. That's an old game. It's an old game that I would argue doesn't have that much content in it to warrant a $10 price point. I think that's silly. I don't like the way they priced it personally. But Jazz Jackrabbit is out. I've known that game forever. I remember my introduction to that series was when I was a kid. My brother-in-law showed me. I was the youngest of a big family, so when I was like, I don't know, 10 or 11, my sister was already married. He showed me a copy of Jazz Jackrabbit, the Christmas edition. Because that's what games were doing back in those days. They would just release, this is the Christmas edition, an entirely new version of the game with Christmas stuff. New levels, a few new graphics, everything. Only the hero's wearing a Christmas hat. Jetpack did it, and Jazz Jackrabbit did it as well. I'd be interested to see if the Jazz Jackrabbit Christmas edition is included in that pack. I have to think it is. GOG is typically pretty good about that sort of stuff, but I don't know. What I want to know is, if they're going to take old abandonware games and re-release them, where is Epic Pinball? Come on now. Epic Pinball was a great game, and it was a game people knew and talked about at school. And it's from Epic Mega Games. You know, come on, Tim Sweeney at his finest. Right? I don't know. Maybe let it stay abandonware. Well, that has been my weekend roundup. We're going to call it a Vancast. I'm dragging. I'm on my way to the office now to start my week. And you know what? I'm going to make it a good one. Even though in my bones I feel like my spooky, scary skeleton is just going to fall apart into a pile of bloody nonsense on the floor, I'm going to keep it together, and I'm going to make it a good day anyway. And I'm going to do that by drinking a crap load of coffee. I'll see you guys back at the comfortable Panzer Studios. Oh, so comfortable here in the Panzer Studios. I got the Christmas lights on. I got some coffee, although admittedly this is cold. I had some black coffee early in the morning that just sat on my desk all day. Now that I'm recording, why not? It's one of the benefits of drinking your coffee black is it doesn't go bad. It doesn't go bad, but it doesn't stay good. It's funny how that works out. All right, so this is a very serious part of the show. Just a little bit. I don't like to drag it out. But this is Patreon sponsored, so I want to say thanks to the guys who give of their resources to help make sure I don't end up like VidMe. Ooh, too soon? Sorry. All right, and they are Hemrock, James, Sendu, Tecmo Balls, Darauka, Six Health the Fury, and the Cartridge Brothers. Thank you guys. I don't have a whole lot of perks to give you, but I give them the show just a little bit early. So if you want to help keep the lights on, get the show just a little bit early, head over to Patreon, and thank you very much. That's all I got. One of these days I'll write out a Swift live read that works so that I can make that bit a little smoother. But for now, we'll just go with that. All right, let's see what else is going on over at chipmusic.org. That's from Crab. That's from Crab. Identitates. I guess is how you say that. All right, guys. Let's do this. I've got one more segment from the Vancast where I went over some stuff I was pretty passionate about. Feeling good. Let's take a trip in the van one more time. Then after that, we're gonna goof around, read some stuff on the internet, do some responses, and then do the mailbag. All right, guys, you're listening to Tiger Claw Radio. Tuesday evening, I'm driving home. You'll never guess what I just saw. There's a guy driving down the middle of the street in like a, I don't even know how you would describe it. Like, I guess you would say a rickshaw, but you typically think of like a rickshaw as like a hand-drawn cart with people sitting on it. He was riding on like a bicycle attached to like a big like passenger cart. And he was wearing, old man was wearing like a weird like engineer's cap. And to make matters weirder, all that was in the cart was a loose black lab. This dog just like running around in circles in this bicycle-driven rickshaw from, I don't even know when. It was the weirdest thing I'd ever seen. I wish I'd have taken a picture of it, but... So it's Tuesday, and my head's killing me. I felt a step behind most of the day. I didn't get a lot of sleep last night, but here's the reason why I wanted to do some afternoon van casting. I was watching some Bithead 1000 today. So the old Bithead 1000 catalog of videos. And I got to this one video where he was opening a gigantic box of Atari games. He pulled 100 Atari games out of a box, 100. And while he was pulling them out, he had this crazy idea to host a contest, what he called his strongman contest, to see how many Atari games you could carry in one hand without having them tip over. Which I thought was a brilliant idea, but also the dumbest idea I think I'd ever actually do for a video, is to stack up my Atari games in that way. So I went to his channel and I searched the term strongman contest and then contest results. I did a lot of different searches and I could not find a results video for that contest. So what I think happened was something he threw out there as he was filming and never actually made it a real thing. So I'm driving home now and I kind of want to make a video about that. Even though this was from 2011, all right, this is old. We're talking no longer a contest, for sure. But I kind of want to see how many Atari games I can hold in one hand in a stack in the air, and make a video out of it. I'm afraid I'm going to damage my Atari games. I know those things are supposed to be bulletproof, but they're really, really old. Like really old. Yeah, but that would be fun. You know, my room is missing the Atari, for sure. There's a couple things that haven't made it to the game room yet. One is my NES, one is my Famiclone, and another is my Atari. I think that's what hasn't made it. The NES and the Famiclone are hooked up to a TV, like downstairs, so they're fighting fit. But my Atari has been in a drawer forever. And watching the old Bithead 1000 videos, because this is 6-year-old channel that I started at video number 1 and started watching through the catalog. They make me want to get out my Atari. I like the Atari. It reminds me of when my son was born. It's one of the things I've said on the air many times is the Atari was great for one thing. It dumps you right into the game. There's no loading. There's no title screen. There's no explanation. There's nothing. Turn the Atari on. You play and you die and you write down your score, and you can do that entire process in about 30 to 60 seconds. So when my son was born, that was it. I know I've said it many times. Now my kids are getting older. We're starting to play some couch multiplayer, in certain games. My Atari's been put away for a while. Because one of the things about the Atari is it's a space hog, a space high in space consumption. Because the start and game buttons and difficulty switches, all that's right there on the system. So that box has to be handy. You could put a Wii on the shelf, get the homebrew channel on it or something, and never touch it. Or at the very least, just put disc in and then sit on the couch and play the game you put in all night. But for the Atari, if you're playing it, you got to have that system right there in front of you. It's like there's a good amount of Atari games. They need you to smash that reset switch in order to start the game. A lot of games are like that, actually. So it has to have a prominent space. It has to be on top because it's a top loader, and it has to be close to wherever you're sitting because the joysticks are not that long. That's a lot of stipulations. Like, some systems are easier to find places for than others. Like my NES is always an easy one because it's nice and flat on top and it's front loading. So the NES can always be on the bottom of a stack, a small stack. I'm not abusing my systems here, but let's face it, the NES is a power bottom. That's what it does. This thing, one slight change in my setup, and the Atari has to go in a drawer. So that's where it's been. And now we have a situation where I've been to MagFest a couple of times since it's been, a prominently featured system in my collection. So I've got games that haven't been run before. I'm not even talking about games I haven't played. I'm talking about games I haven't run. Typically when I get a game, if I'm going to buy a game and I'm not going to play it, I'm at least going to turn it on. I'm going to see that title screen. I'm going to be like, yeah, okay, this works. This one will run. I know it booted up successfully. I can put it back on the shelf, confident in the fact that this will run. I've had games for the Atari that will not boot up. Just thought I'd throw that out there before you say, oh, the Atari games, they all work. You don't have to worry about it. Had games that don't work. I will admit that it might be my system in some cases. I use the Atari Junior, and I've had problems with Activision games. But anyway, I like the Atari. I want to get out my spiral-bound notebook. I want to write some scores in it. And I'm going to have a video for that thing next year. I started my spiral-bound notebook in 2008. We're almost at 2018. That's going to be 10 years of scores. 10 years of scores, of passwords, of handwritten clues in certain games. I'm so glad I have it. It's a great thing to have a notebook like that. That's what you have in old games instead of achievements. We didn't have achievements in old Nintendo games, but you would have passwords. That was your achievement list, right? So if you were playing Mike Tyson's Punch-Out in 1991, and you got to that first password where you the pink bicycle scene, pink jumpsuit and bicycle scene, that password went down on a piece of paper, and there you go, achievement unlocked. So if you held all that in a notebook, it was the awesomest thing to go back and look over. It really was. I feel like I've told this before. Probably have many, many times. Here's another one I've told many times. River City Ransom, I think, is my favorite example because it had these crazy complicated passwords. River City Ransom's password
the password system was so complex. If you played the game and you get a password at any time in that game, you didn't have to hit a checkpoint, you didn't have to get game over. You just went to the screen, you went to the password screen, and you got your password, and that was it. You could pause, go to the password screen, and get your password. Then you could leave the password screen and go back to the password screen a second time without unpausing. Your password would be completely different. Completely different. Now that I'm older and I'm a programmer, I'm thinking about all the variables you'd have to keep track of to record that password. I don't know why it was so complicated. I really don't. How many things did you have to keep track of in River City Ransom in a password? There were maybe 15 statistics, 15 different statistics, each with a 2-digit number. You had you had to keep track of the number of bosses. Hang on a second. We're going to figure this out. I'm going to dig deeper. Just hang on a second. I need to make it through this intersection alive here. Right. Statistics. So you had, like, we'll say 15 statistics. I don't know exactly how many, but we'll say 15. They all had a 2-digit number for the most part. 63 being the max score, with the exception of the health. Your health went up to 127. I think willpower max is 63. So that's a lot, admittedly. You could use, let's see. What would the best way of doing that be? And then there was also the inventory. I guess that was another thing. It kept track of your inventory. So let's say, how many spaces were in the inventory though? Maybe 10? Jeez, this is getting complicated really fast. So if you got 10 spaces in your inventory over I don't know how many items, because there's probably, what's all the beeping? Nobody's beeping. Are they beeping at me? I don't have a flat tire, do I? Do I? I don't have a flat tire. Stop your beeping. You're freaking me out. All right. So look, the inventory couldn't be that difficult. If you gave it every item in the the item pool a character code, I think there was few enough items you could do that. Then that would be 10 characters right there just for the inventory, and another 10 for the another 15 for the statistics, plus another one for the number of bosses, plus another one for the money that you had. I don't know. Yeah, maybe it's more complicated than I thought. That's River City Ransom. It had a lot of data points to take care of in the password system. I have to say I prefer the complicated system to having less data points and the password system just not covering everything, because that makes me go bananas. For example, Goonies 2. It's been a long time since I played through Goonies 2. There was a time when I could just beat that game and I knew where everything was. That time's passed. But Goonies 2, when you reload your password, or when you put in your password and you reload the game, I seem to remember it not keeping track of how many bombs you had, not keeping track of how many keys you had, and of course it put you back at the very start of the sprawling map. Excuse me. So you have to make a choice, and here's where I'd like you guys to weigh in. Would you rather record a long password like in River City Ransom, or would you rather lose your data every single time like in Goonies 2? Think about Goonies 2. Would you continue Goonies 2 if it had a big password like River City Ransom? Or imagine putting in a nice comfortable password in River City Ransom, but it having no idea how much money you had or what half your stats were. Just something to think about. All right. Let's call that a Vancast. Go back to the nice and comfy Panzer Studios. I worry that these are dragging on too long. That's making the show outstay its welcome. I guess we'll see. All right, boys and girls. This is the part of the show I set aside to interact with you. It's a small operation. Not too many people tune in, and that's okay. Especially now that it's getting close to Christmas time, people are spending time with their families. People are taking time off from work, so they don't exactly need somebody to help make the drive a little easier, which I think is what I'm best at. But that enables me to really be accessible and have a good time with those of you who want to write in. So there's a couple ways to do this. Basically, the hard and fast rule has been any place you can download the podcast is viable to leave a comment. The best way to do it is through YouTube, but I also accept them, anywhere else. The thing is, it's so fragmented that has led me to miss comments quite frequently. So the rule now, or the procedure I'm going with now is YouTube and the next round are guaranteed. Everywhere else, I'll do the best I can, but you got to bear with me. So I can see that we got nothing on the next round, but there are a few on YouTube. So let's head over there and see what we got. Dumaze saves the day. All right, thanks, Dumaze. Thanks, Dumaze, because I really want to do the bit where we're reading just posts off the internet and goofing around, but I really I don't have a ton of time to let it run late this week, so you're really saving the day on this one. All right, good buddy Dumaze. All right, so the way he does it, we got 6 comments here. He kind of leaves them, peppers them through as he's listening. So let's start at the bottom. He goes, I actually have a TWO. Oh, excuse me. Wow, I botched that already. Whew, D- in reading skills. He was spelling the word two. That's what that was. He just said in caps. That's it. We're trying again. We're gonna hold on. Sip of coffee, as Bithead would say. He says, I actually have two 36-inch Sony Triton tube TVs. They are epic. And the bigger, the better. If one wants to play light gun games, too. Yeah, I agree with you, Dumaze. I got my little tube TV, and as far as light gun games go, it's not really big enough for an epic shootout. But the fact that it's a tube TV works. And I can make the light gun games work by not being that far back. So not ideal, but they run. So I love them. God bless. I wish I could have a big tube TV hanging around. We had one years ago, but we had to get rid of it for space issues because, that's the way it is. Moving on, he also writes, speaking of light gun games again, especially for modern TVs, the Wii has a bunch of good ones. Better than any old school ones and works on modern TVs. House of the Dead Overkill, Dead Space Extraction, the 2 Resident Evil ones, all good times. Got a question for you about that, Dumaze. Now, I know that the Wiimote, serves a really good functionality for a light gun. I also know that you can get light gun molds, where it's just like a gun shape, and you put the Wiimote in it. But the thing about the Wiimote is that when you are pointing it at the TV, it has like a jitter to it. It's not a smooth left and right motion. When you're tracking with that motion sensing controls on the Wii, there's a big jitter to it, and I always kind of had the feeling that would take a toll if you played a light gun game. So does it? I mean, you said in your comment that those are better than the old school ones. I mean, that's a pretty bold claim there, sir. Now, granted, a lot of those old light gun games are really stripped down, but I was under the impression, just going with what I've heard and seen, that the best light gun games for home systems were on some of the later Sega consoles. I mean, it was the Enforcer, right? That blue Magnum that was on like either the Sega Saturn or the Sega CD. I mean, that to me is the coolest light gun. Even if it only works for one game. The Enforcer is dope. It is dope. But there's a lot of light gun games. I'm not really well versed in this subject. It's one of the things that makes it difficult to talk about. Like, I know the PlayStation has one too, and
All right, well, okay. Moving on. Your Windows 7 key was stolen and is now blacklisted. This happens now and then. Yeah, I know, Dumaze. This is kind of a bummer. I actually haven't figured out how I'm going to do this yet, but my Linux distro is decidedly dated. I'm using a version of Linux Mint that's 2 versions old, and I don't really have a whole lot on this computer that can't be gotten rid of. My TCR archive is all loaded to archive.org. I do it every week now, so that's up to date. So my TCR stuff can pretty much get wiped and it'll be fine. I'd like to get like a small folder of the core assets, those sound bites that you hear every week. And I might I don't know what I'm going to do, because I have to have Windows to play, my games library. But I also want to get a slicker, different Linux. I don't know what kind of Linux I'm going to go with next. But that's the can of worms I have. I don't quite want to get into yet. Because, Linux is where I want to do my video editing. KDN Live is a slick video editor, and it's free. So I don't know. It's really going to be. I want to do. I'm going to be doing more work in Linux than I have been. So I guess I'm back to looking at Linux distros. Maybe I'll go for, I don't know, KDE or something. Something I haven't run. This is the time when it comes to Linux where it's like you start making live boots and you start trying stuff out. But be that as it may, there's that, and then there's also how am I going to get Windows back legit. So I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what I'm going to do, to be honest with you. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll buy a Windows 8 key because those are $10. I'll buy a Windows 8 key and I'll make a tiny Windows partition. There you go. That's what I would do. If Windows was a little bit better with the way it handled partitions, because the problem with installing Windows is I had Linux first, right? I started with Linux Mint when I first built the Panzer, and then once I could afford it, I bought Windows 7. And when I tried to install Windows 7, I even bought a second hard drive for it. So it's like 2 separate hard drives so that they could coexist. Windows 7 wanted both. It would not allow a Linux partition to remain on the computer in any capacity. So Linux is different. If you got Windows and you're installing Linux is like, sure, just cut us off a little piece. We'll install there. We'll give you a grub menu. You'll be fine. But I don't get the same courtesy from Windows. If I did, I'd probably get, buy an 8 key and then make a tiny Windows 8 partition just so that I say I could. I don't know. I was bummed out about this whole Windows 7 key going belly up, but the idea of restructuring my hard drives, it's kind of starting to sound like a positive thing. So we'll see. I'll give you updates on that as they happen. Dumaze also writes, you said you get what you pay for. I came up with a much better and more accurate one. You won't get what you don't pay for. It's a subtle difference. You get what you pay for implies that if you pay enough, you'll get what you want for sure, guaranteed. But I could sell you a big bag of crap for $50 and call it cheesecake. In this case, you sure did pay for it, but you did not get it. Conversely, if I offer you a nice cheesecake and I need 10 cents for it, you won't get good cheesecake, as you did not pay appropriate for it. So follow me. Hold on, I want to read this exactly as it's written, because this is one of those things where I think it's a typo, but the way it's written is so beautiful that it's no disrespect to Maze. The typo has to be read. So here it goes. So follow me lead and take this to the world with you. Follow me lead. You won't get what you don't pay for. You know what? You got something there. You can't always buy your way into getting the top-notch stuff. You got to do your research. So, I don't know. And then he also writes, I'm glad I never bothered to upload anything to VidMe yet. Well, yeah, it's gone now, so what are you going to do? Truth be told, I watched some good stuff on VidMe, and I don't know. I'm thankful that I saw a dope playthrough of Quake on the Nightmare difficulty, and I'm thankful that I got to see some StarCraft Let's Plays that I really enjoyed. I saw some really, really dope Let's Play channels that I liked on VidMe. But I mean, every VidMe creator under the sun did the same thing. They were all simultaneously uploading to YouTube as well. So as much as I know YouTube's tools are stupid, maybe I can try their YouTube gaming thing and see if I can find smaller Let's Players that way. To be fair to YouTube, I've not tried that yet. I would love to do what Steve Benway used to do. I don't know if he still does it. I haven't watched a Benway video in a while. But Steve Benway used to have these Friday Talkie videos. And at the very end of it, once he was done talking, he would denote like a solid 5 minutes at the end, where he would not just give a channel a shout out, but really showcase a channel, usually a smaller channel. I would love to do that with a Let's Player. Have like a little, not really big and drawn out, because I know it's not going to be for everybody, but just like a little, maybe 30, 60-second segment where it's like, hey guys, I just found this channel called Butt Farts. He specializes in text adventures. I don't know, so I've been watching this channel, something like that, But I'd have to be taking in enough new material to be able to fill out a segment like that. That's a thought. All right. When it comes to Let's Plays, though, I stick to the same few guys. So yeah, not really a segment I can fill in that one. Finally, Dumaze writes, Mr. Robot is a brilliant show. The crazy dude starring in it has crazy eyes from hell, and he plays a crazy guy. It is insane, literally, and awesome. And, I I have not, outside of the comments, because I know that was mentioned last week, I have not heard of Mr. Show yet. Mr. Show, not Mr. Show. The Mr. Robot. Mr. Show, I think, was something with Bob Odenkirk. Bob Odenkirk and who's the guy he used to work with all the time? He played Tobias in Arrested Development. What's that guy's name? I can't think of his name. But anyway, television. That's pretty much it. Let's see. How far are we in? Jeez Louise, 52 minutes. Can you believe it? This episode of TCR might make it under an hour. I worry about those longer shows. I think they're killing my audience. Yeah, I've been rewatching those Friday the 13th movies. I just finished number 3. I started number 4 this morning, but I decided to wait until I could one-shot it. I hate having to stop in the middle of a movie and then go to work and then come back and finish it later. So I think I'm going to call it an episode so that I can watch Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter. Alright, so hey man, look, whatever brought you here in December, 53 minutes and 30 seconds into Tiger Claw Radio, episode 213. Thanks for spending time with me. This is a very, there's a lot of joy this time of year, but it can also be very stressful. Look, and I understand that, especially if you're a single guy or something like that. Sometimes if you don't have the family on television that you can spend the holidays with, it can also be a very heartbreaking time. That's something I remember very, very well from that time in my life. So wherever you are in your life, I'm raising my day-old coffee cup to you, boys and girls. And my message, if anything, is to hang on. Don't give up. Keep hanging on, because I'm rooting for you. And I'll see you in the next one.